opposite, that we'll continue to work very closely with our district health authorities as we continually do. We'll continue to make sure that the funding is available through those business plans, and I will be very happy the day that we'll come to this House and say that they have been completely approved and available to all Nova Scotians.
Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Justice. You know, Mr. Speaker, in January of this year, Darth Fardy, who had spent 10 years as the review officer with regard to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, had retired, and he's now started a new group called the Right to Know Coalition. But, Mr. Speaker, it's been over 10 months since his departure, and we still do not have a replacement for the position of review officer with regard to that act. And I know the position was posted in the newspaper in July. So my question to the Minister of Justice is, when are we going to see an appointment of a new review officer for such an important position?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the question, and I can tell you it'll be very soon.
The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage on your first supplementary.
I suppose I was hoping for a little more detail, but I'll take very soon. Mr. Speaker, the Right to Know Coalition recently came out talking about the need to cut the fees with regard to Freedom of Information applications, something this government increased the fees on back in the early part of this decade. And we've seen a dramatic decrease in the number of applications because of that, and I'm sure that might be something the government was hoping to see as a result of the fee increase. And of course, we all know that in 2003, as a result of those fee increases, the Association of Journalists in Canada recognized this government with its code of silence as being one of the least open governments in Canada, if not the least open. So my question to the Minister, my second question is, when is this government going to cut the FOI fees back to where they were before they increased them?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question as well. I would like to say that Mr. Bishop is presently acting in that position the member asked about, and I think that he's a very professional man who's doing an excellent job. I'd like to publicly thank him and congratulate him for the great work he's doing. Also, the issue around fees, Mr. Speaker, is something I'm very mindful of. And in fact, at this time, myself and my staff have those fees under review.
The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage and your final supplementary.
You know, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Bishop is also the ombudsman for this province, and I think it's fair to say that most Nova Scotians, as part of a democratic society, would expect that we would have a full-time review officer, not a person who has the job of ombudsman and review officer under the Freedom of Information Act. I would think that as a minimum standard for a free and democratic society, we can ensure that we have two separate positions, not one person having to wear both hats. And that is why we need to ensure that this office, this position is filled as soon as possible. So my question is, why does your government refuse to be open and accountable with regard to the Freedom of Information Review Office, as you promised in 1999?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member for the question. I disagree. This government is open and accountable. We encourage citizens that they want information. A lot of information being requested through FOIPOT, Mr. Speaker, it's not required. But, Mr. Speaker, you know, I've met with Mr. Bishop, and I can tell you I have the utmost respect for Mr. Bishop, and I can tell you he is fulfilling both duties 100% at this time and has full confidence in myself and this government.
Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Transportation. Daily, Minister of Transportation. Each day I want you to know as we make our way in, to work, we go through the obstacle course called the 103. It's dangerous. The completion date has been missed. Dexter's Construction does not have the job done as was promised when the contract was let by the completion date. I would like to ask the Minister, what will be the penalty for Dexter's for missing this completion date?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for the question. Indeed, that completion date has gone beyond that which was anticipated. I would have to consult the contract to know the specific amount of the of the penalty, and that's spelled out in contracts as to the amount that they're charged on a daily basis when they go over the date. But I would have to consult the contract to give them the answer to that.
Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect on your first supplementary.
I've received numerous emails and phone calls from people throughout the constituency and from the riding of Chester St. Margaret's who regularly travel that dangerous road. It has become an obstacle course for orange pylons. I'd like to table one of those emails now from Mrs. West. She wants to know very clearly, what is the role of the Minister of Transportation to be responsible if there are accidents along that road due to the delayed construction zone which is currently existing? She's concerned. She wants an answer because each and every day as she travels to and from work, she faces the difficulty of confronting this Dexter's construction that has not met the deadline. When those dollars are available, we'd like to know.
Order, please. The time allotted for question period has expired. Just call the attention of the House. It's becoming far too frequent that electronic devices are ringing in this chamber, both on the floor and in the gallery. And unless people want them banned from this assembly, people will start adhering to a new protocol. Opposition members' business. The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you please call resolution number 656?
Resolution 656. The Honourable Member for Pictou East.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to be the first to rise in relationship to the issue of outmigration. This is an area that is very close to my heart, and I want to speak from my heart on this issue today.
Give us examples now.
Mr. Speaker, 17 of the 18 counties in Nova Scotia are experiencing high degrees of outmigration. 17 out of 18. Only Halifax County is having an influx of people at this time. In the area of 18 to 24-year-olds, a recent study showed that Pictou County, my area, is in fact number 2, second only to Cape Breton County. Over 600 18 to 24-year-olds leaving and not returning other than to vacations. Mr. Speaker, there are over 2,000 that are leaving Cape Breton County, many of them going to Alberta, but many coming to Halifax for their education and never going back to use that education in Cape Breton. I want to talk about the professionals that are leaving. I want to talk about the tradespeople that are leaving. Trenton Works is very, very important to Pictou County. And Trenton Works 1 year ago had 1,000 employees. Just before Christmas last year, over 400 were laid off. Another massive layoff has taken place, and there are now 28 employees left at Trenton Works. 6 times I have gone to Trenton Works in the last year, and the member for Pictou West and I went through that plant when 600 people were working, and 333 of them were welders. Welders are in great demand in Alberta. We are losing a lot of our people at Trenton Works to Alberta. We're not just losing the 18 to 24-year-olds. We are losing people in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And on the doorstep, on the step of the post office in my hometown of Westville, just a week ago, I talked to a 62-year-old who had worked at Trenton Works for 42 years and is on the verge of leaving to go to Alberta to work for 3 years, Mr. Speaker. These are desperate situations. Fire departments. Fire departments in rural areas are losing their young members. Just recently, I was in the East River Valley and at the fire department talking to fire department people, and they trained 3 new firefighters. Those 3 new firefighters, a lot of training, sending them to Waverley, to the school there, all kinds of courses, getting them upgraded, and we have a situation, Mr. Speaker, where 2 of them went out to Alberta. The 3rd one at that time was considering. I talked to his father just a week or so ago, and he was leaving the next day for Alberta as well. Those are the kinds of situations that we are facing with out-migration. We have a situation where grandparents are not seeing their grandchildren grow up. I had a person the other day say to me, 3 out of 3 of my children are out west. I'm not going to have the pleasure of seeing my grandchildren grow up. I have knocked on doors, and actually when I was campaigning, I had one retired couple, I had to get them out to vote early because they were going to be gone before June the 13th, because they were going to Alberta, not to work. They were going because their children were out there and they wanted to experience the growing up years of their grandchildren. So we're not just losing one segment, we're losing people from all age groups. This affects our schools, our rural schools, all of our schools, except perhaps in the metro area. The population, declining so rapidly. Ways have to be found to stop this out-migration. We have to have all of the departments involved coming together, forming some kind of an out-migration committee with senior bureaucrats to try to find solutions, ways of keeping young people in our province, ways of coming up with a real coordinated effort and to do something in the area of economic development, particularly rural economic development. We have to come up with a system of maybe helping out with tax incentives for our young people to keep them here. We have to look at reducing tuition. We have over 400 Nova Scotia students who are currently out at Memorial University in Newfoundland. Mr. Speaker, our farms, we're losing our sons and daughters to Alberta and elsewhere from farming communities. And we're not just giving away our children to Alberta, but we're actually, in the area of farming, we're helping the coffers of Alberta in relationship to all the beef we buy instead of supporting our own farming community. I mean, we have one of the best grass-growing areas in the world. We have to support our farmers. We have to look at our fishery in relationship to intergenerational transfers to make it easier for licenses to be passed on from fathers or mothers to sons and daughters. We have to look at forestry and all the clear cutting that has taken place and the machinery that has displaced so many of our forestry people. There are so many areas. My wife and I operated a bed and breakfast in Cape Breton, and when we would go grocery shopping for that bed and breakfast, I would say to my wife, look at the people in Sobeys or Superstore, chain stores, look at the ages, look at the average ages of these people. And then I would say, contrast it to the next time we are visiting our children who have gone to Metro, our 3 children that have gone to the general Metro area here to find employment. You know, we would go and have a look at that age dynamic there, and we would contrast it the next time that we would be in Halifax. And the ages were just totally different, the average age. We have baby boomers that are coming on stream into old age. Where are we going to be in 2016 and 2026? We cannot get doctors, as the member for Shelburne was saying. We cannot get doctors in our rural areas. I say to you, try to find a carpenter or a plumber or an electrician in rural Nova Scotia today, and it's hard to find them. Mr. Minister of Economic Development, you say that you are in the job creation business. Please bring people together. Please, you know, you can't talk job creation to the displaced plant workers in Lismore. You can't talk job creation to the 1,000 workers at Trenton Works that are gone. I know my time is just about out, but I want to close by saying these departments have to come together on out-migration issues before all our volunteer fire departments are run by people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, before more farmland grows up in alders, before our schools close in greater numbers, and before the average age in this House of Assembly is greater than my current age. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to stand today and debate Resolution 656, long-term plan for ensuring sustainable economic development in rural Nova Scotia and Cape Breton. Well, I thank the member for bringing this to the floor of the House today, because this government is already doing this. And I'll give you some reasons why the member, maybe he should sit back and read some of the literature and speak to some of the local communities that this minister has done since I became Minister of Economic Development. We have been working with local communities, Mr. Speaker. We have been tackling the issue on rural economic development at the local level. We have been dealing with the RDAs, with the councils, with the chambers of commerce, with the boards of trades. Mr. Speaker, I think that's very the proper approach for government to work with the communities. I do not believe government should go in and dictate to communities. I think government should go in and listen to communities of their needs and help them, put the infrastructure and that in place that is needed to secure jobs and enhance jobs and create new jobs within communities. And Mr. Speaker, the new Business Retention and Expansion Program, or BRE, is based on an international approach to economic development that encourages the stability and growth of local companies, Mr. Speaker. And here in Nova Scotia, this approach has been successfully underway in the HRM for some time now. This year, the approach is being undertaken by 8 more counties as an 18-month pilot program. Mr. Speaker, and I would like to also speak how highly I support the RDA system that we have in this province. The RDAs are vocal for all the communities that they represent. And you can go to the Western Valley and ask the Western Valley, Mr. Speaker, and I know that you drive that area a lot on your way back to Halifax, and the void in that community. And Mr. Speaker, I believe it was your community that was involved in the Western Valley RDA, and they dissolved. And there's a big void in that community, Mr. Speaker, and I know that you understand that, and your community chose to go to the Western Southwest Nova RDA. But now the people are on side, and the communities, and they know how important it is to have that RDA in their community, and I look forward to being to be making the announcement with the communities, with the municipalities, the boards of commerce and the chambers of commerce, to announce a new RDA in that community, which they know now how important it is to communities. Last evening, I had the great opportunity to speak to the RDA in Cape Breton region. And they were telling me their focus of where they intend to go to the outmigration of the youth in their communities, how they intend to work. They intend to work with the Department of Education through the Minister of Education. They intend to work with their college and their university in Cape Breton to let the youth know of the jobs that are available here in this great province of ours, Mr. Speaker. And I must say, I'll reiterate that to a question I answered the other day. Mr. Speaker, in the next 5 years, there's approximately 3,500 new jobs in the IT sector here in this province. Mr. Speaker, in the aerospace industry in this province is growing in leaps and bounds. We are the envy of a lot of other provinces in this great country of ours, Mr. Speaker, just because of the trained and skilled workforce that we have that are turning out the products that they're turning out with the aerospace industry. And Mr. Speaker, that industry right now
Word, please. The Minister of Justice.
Time for an introduction.
The Minister allows. The
Thank you,
Minister
Mr.
on
Speaker.
an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to bring to your attention and the attention of all members in the House and in the Speaker's Gallery several very distinguished visitors here to Nova Scotia. You recall earlier this afternoon that I introduced a resolution welcoming the members of the International Association of Security Investigative Regulators. Mr. Speaker, today in the gallery we have several of these members. This is being hosted by the Department of Justice. This association has the goal of enhancing public safety by promoting professionalism in the private security industry through effective regulation. We're very proud of the Department of Justice to honor such a distinguished and a prestigious conference. Mr. Speaker, there are delegates from Manitoba, New Brunswick, Virginia, Minnesota, Louisiana, Florida, Arizona, from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and they're here in the House today, Mr. Speaker, and I would ask that all members to give them a very warm Nova Scotia welcome, and we wish them well in their deliberations over the next day or so. Thank you. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I also want to welcome the members to our chamber here today. Mr. Speaker, going back to my remarks onto the aerospace industry, we're very fortunate to have the highly skilled workforce that we have in our province, but that relates back to a corporation that I believe that we all have to work with and enhance even more and promote it more, and that is our universities and our community college system that we have in this province, Mr. Speaker. We're very fortunate to have the system that we have in this province to educate our youth. But I believe it's a job of all members of this House and all communities to let the youth know the opportunities that there are for them within all of our communities. And I believe it's up to each and every member of this House also to work with your communities to see how we can enhance the economic growth in your community. If it's mining, if it's forestry, if it's IT sector, aerospace, what have you, Mr. Speaker. But this government is committed, Mr. Speaker, to making sure that we work with our RDAs and with our communities to enhance economic growth in every part of this great province of ours. That's why we have contributed, along with the Government of Canada, over $1 million to support the BRE project, Mr. Speaker. And we will be contributing more as we move ahead. And Mr. Speaker, I heard the member from the NDP speak about the Trenton Works. Mr. Speaker, I have had the opportunity to meet with the executive of the Trenton Works. And yes, they have some issues there right now, Mr. Speaker. But I have been personally invited the members from Trenton Works to go on a trade mission with us to the Alberta area and the Calgary and Edmonton in the very near future. Mr. Speaker, I think that's what we have to do. We have to get out and promote what we have in this province. And Trenton Works has a very skilled workforce, and I believe it's up to all of us to work with them to help them and look at new opportunities that are there. And I believe that we can build components for the oil fields here in Nova Scotia and have them shipped out there. I'm a firm believer of that, Mr. Speaker. I believe that according to the KPMG Competitive Alternative Study, that Truro, Pictou, Sydney, and Halifax are ranked among the top 10 Canadian centres to do business in this great province of ours. And again, Halifax was ranked among the top 5 in comparison to the large international centres in North America, Europe, and Asia and Pacific. Mr. Speaker, we recognize our strengths. And some people in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, want to paint doom and gloom. And it is not doom and gloom, Mr. Speaker. All is not lost. We are working with our communities, and this government is determined to enhance every opportunity we have into the business sector. Mr. Speaker, and that goes across, it's a wide sector. And we have to work with all components that we have and all agencies that we have in this province to enhance what we have here in this province, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you, I can speak very forcefully onto the issue of mining in this province, Mr. Speaker. I come from a mining community. And when we lost our mine in Southwest Nova, the void that was left in that community was very hard to replace. And we have not replaced it yet, Mr. Speaker. That was 400 immediate jobs and approximately 400 spin-off jobs. And what that did for our communities was unbelievable, Mr. Speaker. So I believe that we have the mechanisms at our disposal. We had to work with all of our communities. But I really believe that mining is one issue. You know, I'll go back to that, or forestry. I believe that we have to look at value added in every avenue that we can do. But we must work with all communities to make sure that we get the most that we possibly can from every opportunity that's there. I know, working with my colleague from Natural Resources, working with my colleague from Environment and Labor, that we can do that. Working with the Department of Education to make sure that our youth, not when they get into colleges and universities, when they're in the high schools, to let them know the opportunities that's here at home, Mr. Speaker. I think that's all of our jobs to do. We have to enhance the infrastructure in our great province. And that's why the infrastructure program, and I can go back to my days as the warden for our community, how important that program is, Mr. Speaker. And that has touched each and every community in this province. And that's why we've encouraged the federal government to extend that program and to enhance it if any way possible. That you need the infrastructure to attract new businesses to your community, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you, and I know, Mr. Speaker, you can relate to this, our transportation links in Southwest Nova. We have to do everything that we can to enhance the transportation links in Southwest Nova, especially our air links, our sea links, and our ground transportation. But I believe working together, Mr. Speaker, we can all do that. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the members for bringing this to the floor today. I think that it's a good topic, but not all is lost, Mr. Speaker. We're on the right track, and we are creating jobs for Nova Scotians.
Thank you. The honourable member for Digby-Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too am pleased to stand today at my place and speak on rural economic development. Mr. Speaker, parts of Nova Scotia have been experiencing a serious workers' loss to the western provinces of this country. Where other provinces have been experiencing a huge growth in the employment sector, Nova Scotia seems to be falling behind, both in number of jobs available to the skilled workers and in pay that they receive for their labors. While Alberta currently has a record low of 3.9% unemployment rate, well below the national average of 6.7%, and well below Nova Scotia's rate of 8.7%. Looking at Southwest Nova Scotia in particular, with an unemployment rate of 11.1%, we can see how badly the loss of industry has hurt this province. Not just losing jobs in the industries themselves, but also in the jobs lost when certain services are no longer required to sustain them. Mr. Speaker, it is no small wonder that youth and young families in Nova Scotia are leaving for better employment opportunities in Alberta. There's no way to keep Nova Scotians in Nova Scotia if we do not present them with the ample employment opportunities at a competitive salary. What is being done to create more opportunities for Nova Scotian workers? Is it true that our industry isn't as strong as the industry in Alberta? The expanding of oil fields will lead to the creation of 400,000 new jobs. With a labor force of only 300,000, Albertans are looking to the unemployed, underpaid Nova Scotians to fill these spots. Mr. Speaker, between 1991 and 2005, Nova Scotia lost 38,737 people to Alberta. 3,391 of these were from the Digby County alone. 213 of these were youth between the ages of 15 and 25. This is a heavy blow to a region with a population of roughly 18,000 people. When examining the out-migration of youth, it is important to remember that youth under the age of 24 account for almost 2/3 of the minimum wage workers in the province, but only 17% of all employees. It would make sense for youth to go to a place where at the very worst minimum wage is higher than it is here. And at best, they have the option of securing a job that pays above minimum wage. In Nova Scotia, we boast an excellent post-secondary education system, and yet graduates are tossed casually into a labor market that will not recognize their skills. Mr. Speaker, southern and western Nova Scotia has one of the greatest declines in jobs in this province, where full-time employees declined by approximately 3,000 positions. Now 3,000 fewer individuals are participating in the labor force. Historically, employment booms in the other provinces have carried Nova Scotia's labor force out of the province in huge numbers. A labor boom in Ontario in the late 50s and 60s saw over 60,000 workers leave this province. Though these numbers vastly exceed the number of people who have left Nova Scotia in the past 10 years, it is important to remember that the labor boom in Alberta is still in its infancy. 60,000 young baby boomers in the 60s was not a big percentage of young people compared to the amount of young people in Nova Scotia today. Nova Scotia can therefore expect to lose many more workers in the next 5 to 10 years, in numbers that exceed those from 5 decades ago. Indeed, if the prediction of 400,000 new jobs with too few Albertans to fill them is realized, Nova Scotia could potentially lose nearly 100,000 workers, a staggering 1/9 of our population. This could end up being nearly all of our young people of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, the trend for Nova Scotia out-migration is youth and young families, which is evident in the fact that last year employment for older workers or those over 45 years of age had increased, while employment of younger workers had decreased. In the absence of younger workers, the older are stepping up to fill their places. Nova Scotia has too few people from outside migrating into the province to balance out the huge number of people leaving. This trend causes the population to shrink, age, and return seasonally to small cottages in communities that will soon have no one to maintain them if the current trend continues. The question we must ask ourselves, will this province be able to sustain itself as a retirement province? Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia is not an appealing province to work in. Even the jobs that exist do not pay competitive salaries with other provinces. The median income for out-migrants is at its highest at $22,000 per year. In comparison with the income of even unskilled workers in other provinces, this is almost negligible amount, especially for Nova Scotia students looking to pay off massive amounts of debts for acquiring an education meant to get them ahead. It cannot be expected that a student who has spent so much on education would stay in a province that will offer them the lowest salary in their field, especially when they must consider enormous debt payments. The median income in Alberta is now surpassing $60,000 per year. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the cost of living is greater in the western parts of the country, but so too is the opportunity for advancement and recognition. The government is doing little to create an initiative for students and laborers to remain in this province. It is impossible for laborers with no job opportunity to stay when there is somewhere else to go, and ridiculous to expect a worker to stay with an income at 1/3 of what they could be earning elsewhere. Mr. Speaker, this trend is not irreversible. Nova Scotia is rich with natural, sustainable resources that can be developed, creating jobs within these industries and creating jobs in other sectors that are required to support them. I believe it's high time this government of Nova Scotia to start looking for natural resources and looking at ways they can create employment in order to make this province prosper. Mr. Speaker, first of all, we must rebuild the industry that not only created this province, but also this country. That industry is our fishery. We only have to look at other countries that have already done this, and now is the time, not next year, not tomorrow, today. Second, we have the greatest tidal energy resource than any other part of the world. This energy resource, when properly harnessed, could supply the whole country of Canada with hydroelectricity and have lots left over. That source of energy is right here in our very own Bay of Fundy. And unlike the tar sands and coal mines, it will never run out unless the moon falls out of the sky. In turn, for this hydroelectric power, Nova Scotia could give high energy manufacturing and production industries the cheapest power rates in the world, attracting businesses from all over North America and Europe. Rural Nova Scotia accounts for over 50% of our population. Without it, you may find its cities hard-pressed to survive. Rural areas of Nova Scotia are a food source from agriculture and fishery. How could cities survive without these necessities for life? To live and prosper in rural areas, people must learn many trades and skills. Our grandfathers before us done this. They raised farm animals, they grew gardens, fished for several different species of fish at different times of the year. They worked in the forest. They depended on many different trades and skills. It was a matter of survival for their families and their communities. And that was all year round, Mr. Speaker, because there was no such thing back then as employment insurance. Mr. Speaker, today we must do the same but a little different. Today we work with tourism and are expanding into different species of fish than what our grandfathers caught. We must go from one trade or skill to the other. We must diversify the same way they did to survive. Today, if you just depend on one trade or one skill in rural Nova Scotia, you will not survive, and this past generation has proven that. Some people with only one fishing license didn't survive. Some people with only a forestry job hasn't survived. Some people with just dependence on tourism hasn't survived. Even huge companies with one contract has not survived. In rural Nova Scotia, you need diversity for prosperity, and that's the way it always was and always will be. Mr. Speaker, today, with many of our fish species growing more scarce, we must grow fish to feed our population. At the turn of the 20th century, farmers turned to raising cattle as buffalo got scarcer. Can you imagine today if we still depended on wild buffalo to feed our people? We must evolve with the time. The coastal communities are evolving more into tourism to fill with its fishery, but more must be done. Our rural areas must evolve into generating sustainable electricity from its greatest resource of wind and tide. just like we evolved from coal to oil many years ago. We must renew its forestry and fishery management practices to be sustainable so there's no boom and bust like is still happening from its present management system. With poor
Order, please.
vision and the right
Order,
attitude.
please. Order, please. The member's time has expired. Thank you. On a future day, honourable member. The chair now recognizes the honourable member for Hanseath.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure that I'm glad to rise and speak on this issue. It would be much nicer to speak on a more positive topic, I'll be willing to give the honourable member who just finished a minute in the lounge if he wants to finish the rest of that there. I want to say that I don't know if this applies to all the ministers opposite, but certainly the Minister of Economic Development when he spoke. I don't know if members opposite are aware of the song, and I don't know if this is the title, but but anyway, it goes something to the effect of "Hard work never hurt nobody, but I'd rather be lucky," and I think that's what I take from the minister's few minutes, that the province is going to run, or this administration is going to run, on being lucky when it comes to generating jobs or generating wealth in this province, rather than getting down to work to do something. One thing the minister did say, actually a couple things the minister did say, that I have to agree with him on. And one was the Western Valley RDA. I thought that they were doing some very good things down there. And when the minister talked about the closing of a mine, I think he kind of got to the crux of the problem in terms of our mentality around economic development. In this province, I think we still have a colonial mentality. I think we tend to give away our resources with not much benefit to the people. But when we talk about a mine, any of those things we mine, whether it's an aggregate, whether it's a mineral, whether it's oil, we know that the amounts of those substances are finite. In other words, they're going to run out. And this should give the ministers opposite some thought as to what exactly the core in economic development is. So, yes.
Order, please. The Honourable the Premier on an introduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the member for giving up a moment. I'd like to direct members' attention to the East Gallery. Mr. Speaker, we have a guest with us from the Richmond County area, a gentleman who spent many years in the community college system as a teacher there, and certainly is a friend to all members of the House of Assembly. I'd like to welcome Doug Landry to the House.
Thank you. The honourable member for Hanseath.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would be pleased to welcome the guest in the gallery as well. When the minister talked about a mine, what he's saying is, here's a resource that we can extract, that we can either sell as a raw material, or we can value add to it, create more jobs, and sell that material. But what the minister doesn't indicate, and actually what happens in this case is if you can generate enough wealth from a mine, you create the jobs for the miners themselves, number one, then you need support structures around them. You're going to need housing, you're going to need a school for the kids, you're going to need teachers and teachers' salaries, and then all these support services, a medical clinic, then you have nurse and doctor salaries, and all of this generates what we refer to as the economy. The problem with a mine is it's not sustainable. But our other resources we have, agriculture, forestry, and the fishery, these are sustainable, renewable resources that we can develop until the end of time if we do it properly, and we're not doing it properly, Mr. Speaker. Now, with the collapse of the Atlantic codfish or Atlantic groundfish stocks, and this all wouldn't apply to Nova Scotia, but certainly would some of it, there was a loss of 40,000 jobs. If we think about forestry, in relation to the volume of timber harvested, the forest industry employment has declined sharply. Since the 1980s, employment per 1,000 cubic meters of timber harvested has declined by 23.5%, from 1.8 jobs per 1,000 cubic meters, which was the average from 84 to 89, to 1.44 jobs per 1,000 cubic meter in 1999. So in other words, the volume of timber cut per employee has increased substantially in the short term of time, and now takes 25% more wood to maintain one forest industry job than it did a decade ago. And Mr. Speaker, I'll table this for the House. This is from the GPI Atlantic report. I believe it was 2004. I may be wrong on that date. Employment per unit of biomass harvested may also be related to the proportion of value-added manufacturing in the forest industry, since value-added production yields a high ratio of jobs per unit of wood harvested. Volume 2 of these accounts notes that Nova Scotia has one of the lowest rates of value-added manufacturing in wood products in the country, and it explores in some detail a case study that would provide a model for further development of this sector. Nova Scotia's rate of value-added is $82 per cubic meter, compared to $273 per cubic meter in Ontario, $204 in Quebec, $187 in Manitoba, and $123 in New Brunswick. So, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the rate of value added, we are one of the poorest provinces that value adds to our wood products, and this is particularly serious in a province. We have about 6 million acres of what we refer to as operable forest. That's the forest that we can harvest. If we were to land in Nova Scotia today with an uncut forest, we could harvest that in 60 years. We harvest 100,000 acres a year, practically all of it clear-cut. So in 60 years, we could take that 6 million acres and harvest it. The only problem, Mr. Speaker, is we've been harvesting it. We don't have 60 years. Matter of fact, I think we got about 19 years. And even the government, even the Department of Natural Resources talks about a 45-year cycle in the harvest of our forest. We used to talk about 100 years to grow a tree. Now we're talking 45 years to grow it and cut it. Matter of fact, in this province, a 45-year-old tree is just starting to grow. I mean, it's just taken off. And that's when we're going to plan to harvest it. Well, the biggest species that meets our market demands, the ones that this industry rides on, that supplies wealth, is red spruce. Poplar and fir die at about 45 years of age. But these other species are just getting going, and the most lucrative species in this province, and our provincial tree, is the red spruce. Now, CBRM is losing about 10% of its population per year. That's number one. My colleague from Pictou East, he mentioned about Pictou County being second, and they're right. Our thoughts around out-migration are pretty much along the lines of the youth, but that's no longer the case. Actually, it's people who are 50 and 55 and 60. They're leaving for Alberta only for the short term, I think, for most of them. But still, they're going there for work. Someone in my area, 2 years older than me, he left in July, came back in October using a dozer, and this was on account of the close down of Stora. He's a woods contractor, so this was a way to help him. But if we look at, and my colleague from Digby Annapolis, he mentioned about the issue of the tides. this province has done nothing to encourage alternative energy or anybody who's interested in creating jobs doing that. So, you know, when the minister talks about what the province is doing, he mentioned the other ministers in different departments, well then, you know, start to draw some legislation that would affect NSPI and the way it purchases alternative energy, so that actually some of these companies could make some money. That would be an incentive for more to get at it. And I think that if you want to attack the issue that you have put in place around school closure moratoriums, then you've got to do something to keep youth here, and you're going to have to change your policy. We import $240 million worth of beef. That could be grown here. That could be manufactured here, and we don't do that. That would maintain a rural economy, keep young people here, and keep our schools open and the infrastructure that goes with it. Pork producers are another group that are in trouble. We don't make use of our sustainable, renewable resources like agriculture, forestry, and the fishery. And until we do that and maximize what they can do for this province, young people will continue to leave, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Time has expired for debate on Resolution 656. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Mr. Speaker, can you please call resolution number 658?
Resolution number 658 for debate. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to rise on this occasion to discuss the resolution I put forth yesterday, Resolution 658. I must say that I wasn't surprised, but a little disappointed that this resolution got named yesterday. The premise of this resolution was in hopes that all members of this House of Assembly seen fit to support and encourage early childhood development. I personally didn't find anything, along with my colleagues, found anything offensive about that. When we talk about early childhood development, I can go back to the campaign and think about parts of my community that I and people I've talked to, individuals, mothers who are now stay-home mothers, but not by choice, Mr. Speaker. These young people have been forced to stay home and look after their children, give up careers that they have paid out tuitions to get their education for, high-paying jobs, because of the unavailability of daycare spaces and funding. This is of great importance in the sense that this province now has a population that is outgrowing the portion of the province that is currently on the social services system. We now have a new class of people in Nova Scotia called the working poor. These are the people that have invested in their futures and are unable to obtain any goals or incomes from them because they have seen fit to bring forth and raise families, but aren't able to seek employment because of the lack of funding for this category. I think I'd like to draw the House's attention to some of the recent events that we've been dealing with in the province when we've looked at our justice system and the battles that we're having with our young people today. In bringing forth a resolution like this, I would ask this House, Mr. Speaker, and the government to seriously think about investigating and investing in the importance of bringing children up. Children, we've always said, has been our foundation of our future. In other parts of the world, children are usually the ones that end up raising their parents. So an early emphasis on human development at the stages of early childhood is essential, Mr. Speaker. Some of the issues that we're currently dealing with, how our youth make choices, or how they don't make good choices, Mr. Speaker, I think could be remedied if some of these youth would have been given the chance or the opportunity to have that foundation, to have that proper stage of human development in place. But unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, governments in the past have seen fit not to give proper attention this crucial part of human development. Many, I'll go back to my youth and when I grew up. Much of my care as a young person was from our communities, from my neighbors. My mom happened to be a stay-home mom, but if she wasn't available, I became an extension of my community, and my community gave me that care. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, with society today, we're unable to do that. With the way planning and development's taken part in our communities, the increase in crime, we don't have that trusting nature anymore with people. So, in speaking here today, part of the resolution was in hopes that the governments would adopt some of the recommendations by Fraser Mustard. And I want to raise one interesting quotation from that report. There was a recommendation to establish a legislative and funding framework to support building of ECD and parenting centers as part of a broader human development initiative. Do not place ECD, a component of human development, in ministries or municipal service programs concerned with health care and welfare. That's a great point, Mr. Speaker, to bring forth and in hopes that people might pay attention to it. And I can tell you now that, when I walk through my community, and I struggle constantly, how can I eliminate some of the issues of poverty, some of the issues of youth crime? And I can only go back to say that those people that reside in my constituency and some of the other constituency across this province, Mr. Speaker, haven't had that opportunity to grow up in a loving, caring atmosphere such as I had. So I believe it's necessary. And if the government really looks at the programs that they are bringing forth, investigates how legislation and those programs are actually working, who's the lives that these programs affect. And we can talk about 450 daycare spaces over 10 years, and that initiative, that bold initiative to try to remedy the situation. But I honestly believe that, early on, a lot of the people I talk to in and around early childhood development, they would like to see, as would I, a consistent effort, much more funding, and not just over a 10-year basis. We would like to see, a lot of the people I've talked to, we'd like to see a policy, a commitment on behalf of not just the government of the day, but future governments to really encompass what the early childhood development programs are all about and how important they are to forming society, how important they are to enabling a young person to come through with the best possible foundation. And Mr. Speaker, we have situations like this. We've had successes in our country. In Quebec, Quebec has affordable licensed child daycare, and figures have shown, Mr. Speaker, that with this, parental behaviors have changed. They have that ability to go on and have a career. They know their children are being taken care of. They have that peace of mind. And what's happened in Quebec is there's been a decline in welfare rates among single parents, and there's been a greater enrollment in post-secondary education by women. And if we go into our communities and we really see the way today our communities across this province are deteriorating, the root of poverty is that lack of foundation that we have, that lack of support that a young person might get in bringing up their child. And Mr. Clinton many years ago had said, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think that was a wonderful, wonderful phrase and framework for any society across the world to adopt. And I would hope that along with a lot of the issues that we're talking about, consistently today, tomorrow, in the past, that the minister would champion it. And I know the minister has been in the education system. She's seen children come through the school system with some having the benefits of having surroundings of good families, strong support systems. But I'm sure the minister would also state that she has seen children that haven't had that same benefit of that proper early human development. And Mr. Speaker, I stand today to say that I'll continue my support and continue to be a voice for not only the childhood advocates, but the families not only in my constituency, but the families that are struggling across this province to get over that stumbling block. And, you know, we say that Nova Scotia is a great place to live, but unfortunately, you know, there are those people out there, those families out there that are struggling day to day because they haven't been able to source out those childcare spaces, that necessary foundation that would enable them to allow them to have more opportunities to offer more to their families. You know, we live in a society today that, you know, chances are with the cost of living, both parents have to work. And when parents are forced to put their children in the care of their parents or their grandparents, that's a struggle, Mr. Speaker, that they have. And that's a burden on grandparents that they really shouldn't have to take on. That is their time, their golden years to live. And mind you, most grandparents don't mind taking the care of their children. But it's a burden that shouldn't be necessary if funding was made available for this part and necessary part of our society, Mr. Speaker. I want to finish up by saying that, you know, when we look, and we will continue to look and raise questions in this House and in the media, in and around our justice system and youth crime today, Mr. Speaker, and I can only tell you that it is my belief that if all children across this province, many of them living in poverty, Mr. Speaker, if those children were able to have that foundation, that solid foundation that will enable them to be surrounded by the necessary supports that will bring them up, bring them to a level where they can make those proper decisions. I honestly believe that if things like this, programs were like this in place and funding was made available for programs in early childhood development, that the justice system wouldn't be burdened, because those youth today making the mistakes are making mistakes because they haven't been given that opportunity, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to all honourable members here in the House today. Thank you for the opportunity to rise and speak today on Resolution 658. Mr. Speaker, children are our most precious resource. They are indeed the future. I've spoken in this House before about my own experiences, and I want to reference those experiences again, because quite frankly, this resolution deals with my two favorite topics, children and education. Now, as the honourable member who made this resolution may know, Mr. Speaker, I am the proud mother of 4 children. I am an educator, having spent 15 years in the public education system here in Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, I will always be both and extremely proud of being both. So thank you to the member for Dartmouth North for this debate. And Mr. Speaker, the end of the resolution, 658, states, "Be it resolved that this House recognize the need for a system of early learning and care in Nova Scotia, which gives all families access to quality, affordable, and appropriate childcare and early childhood education." Well, quite simply, Mr. Speaker, we could end the debate right here, right now, because there is no debate. We already agree. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia has a system of early learning and care, giving all families access to quality, affordable, and appropriate childcare and early childhood education. Mr. Speaker, that is our own, made in Nova Scotia, made for Nova Scotians, 10-year child care plan that this government announced in the spring. Before becoming Minister of Community Services, Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to be included in the child care announcement up at the Halifax campus of the Nova Scotia Community College. I was with the member for Kings South then Minister of Community Services, at the Leeds Street Daycare with stakeholders from the early learning child care sector when he unveiled this new program. The variety of stakeholders who were present that day, Mr. Speaker, were eager and encouraged by the department's announcement. And Mr. Speaker, we've been running with this program ever since. We all know, Mr. Speaker, that the first 5 years of a child's life are extremely important in shaping their future. Child care providers and parents work together, playing an important role in helping children develop the tools they need to become healthy adults. This summer, I had a wonderful time with the children and staff of the town daycare center in Glace Bay. I had the pleasure of delivering a check for $700,000, Mr. Speaker, to help them build and expand their facility. This was an opportunity for me, Mr. Speaker, to see the good work going on there. I interacted with the children, the board members, and the staff. It was indeed a delightful day. In September, Mr. Speaker, I joined the team at the Alexandra Children's Centre in North End, Halifax, for a sod turning for their new and expanded centre. That check was worth close to $800,000, Mr. Speaker. They're adding an infant daycare program to care for 10 children between the ages of 12 to 18 months. In late September, I was at the Through the Years Community Daycare in Hubbards to announce 150 subsidized, portable child care spaces for all Nova Scotians. And Mr. Speaker, there's more to come. As I said before, today's children are the future. Giving all children a good start in life is a wise investment for families and their communities. This government is making huge strides in ensuring that today's children get the good start they deserve. From the wonderful work done through my Department of Community Services and with other departments like education, health, and health promotion and protection, we are working hard each and every day, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of Nova Scotian children and families. Education has a preschool pilot project for children aged 4 to 6 that is looking like a real success story, Mr. Speaker. The early childhood educators at both our departments are working together to ensure we provide a consistent and sustainable approach to preschool care in Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, promoting and providing good nutrition and a healthy lifestyle is just one part of this government's program to give our kids a head start in life. We're partnering, Mr. Speaker, with the Department of Energy to offer a repair and renovation loan to daycare centres to create energy efficiencies and address our government's goal of becoming more energy efficient. Through energy savings, child care centres will be able to reinvest that money into programming for kids. Mr. Speaker, the Nova Scotia government is committed to improving childcare and helping parents and the people who provide quality care for our children. And Mr. Speaker, let me tell you how. This government is investing more than $130 million in our 10-year early learning and childcare plan. We are working to strengthen the quality and accessibility of childcare in Nova Scotia and to improve supports for low-income families who need childcare to go to work or school. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker. What works for a family in rural Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, may not work for a family living in urban Halifax. That's why staff of our Early Learning and Child Care Group regularly work with stakeholders, and it's why they consulted with Nova Scotians around the province to hear directly from the parents and families. Mr. Speaker, we're doing this the right way. We're involving stakeholders to ensure that our long-term plan will be appropriate, to ensure we are investing taxpayers' money in the best manner possible. This is a long-term investment that deserves careful consideration and good planning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government is listening. We're listening to those who truly want the best for their children. We're listening to single parents, Mr. Speaker. We're listening to families who may have to pick up and move with their children to another community in pursuit of employment. We're listening to mothers who don't have other support systems and want more family daycare centers in which to place their babies. And Mr. Speaker, we're listening to child care workers who want and deserve more support for their profession. We know that listening and investing in our children and families today will make Nova Scotia's future brighter. And Mr. Speaker, here's what our 10-year sustainable child care plan is all about. $80 million to license child care facilities to help create approximately 1,000 additional full-day child care spaces. Increase infant care spaces for approximately 200 infants. Streamline funding for repair and renovation, energy, accessibility upgrades, and enable centers to promote sustainable business practices. $20 million, Mr. Speaker, to help establish family home daycare across Nova Scotia, which will increase the availability of childcare, particularly in rural areas where regulated child care may be limited. We recently consulted Nova Scotians on this initiative, Mr. Speaker, and we will be demonstrating more progress soon. Mr. Speaker, this plan, this Made in Nova Scotia for Nova Scotians plan, has as an objective. Developing this plan was to build on an existing foundation for licensed child care in Nova Scotia that will allow a flexible, equitable system. Mr. Speaker, I will continue to work with my federal counterparts, who I've met with, and I will speak out, Mr. Speaker, on another day with a much stronger voice to ensure that the needs of Nova Scotians in the early learning and child care programs are being met, Mr. Speaker. We're on the right path, and we will continue down that path, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's good to have support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to acknowledge the Minister and give her credit for the tremendous effort over the last 10 minutes. I want to also recognize the member from Dartmouth North who brought this resolution forward. And I want to read therefore be it resolved, the House recognize the need for a system of early learning and care in Nova Scotia, which gives all families access to quality, affordable, appropriate child care and early child care education. And it was interesting to listen to the Minister speak that she agreed with that and the debate could stop. Because I believe this side of the House supported that resolution. So we're debating this because that side of the House chose not to. So that's why this debate is on the floor today, Mr. Speaker. I want to agree with the Minister when she spoke about the complexity of childcare and how the system needs to be flexible. She's very right. The issues are different for every family. The dynamics of every family are different, and so should childcare be flexible to enable it to work with the
different working hours, the different dynamics of that individual families. One of the things that was interesting last week when I introduced a bill around a committee to deal with the poverty issue was 11,400 children in Nova Scotia. 11,400 children are living below the poverty line. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the child care issue is one of those stresses that are just adding to an already multiple number of stresses these families have to deal with. And this is one thing that we as legislators could deal with immediately. There is money on the table, as the minister has spoken about. She made an announcement of 150 spaces. Mr. Speaker, she knows, and we all in this House know, that is a far cry from what is required across to deal with the issue across Nova Scotia. Part of this resolution talked about quality. We as a caucus have no issue with the quality of daycare that's being provided to Nova Scotians today. We do have an issue, though, quite frankly, and I think this is where we need to go, and I think in the long run will affect the quality, and that is the fact that we are not putting the proper amount of resources in to pay for the people who work in daycare facilities. It is an issue that will come back to haunt us, Mr. Speaker, if we continue to put the workers in this industry under tremendous financial burden because they're going to and have no choice but to try to support their own families and find other ways to do that. So I think that's one of the things that the minister should be dealing with and dealing with immediately as we begin to go forward. She also talked about, we've talked about affordability as part of this resolution speaks to, and that's fundamental. This is really what this whole debate is about, whether or not families can afford childcare. And that's what brought it here. I think it's probably the single biggest issue that families are faced with. When you consider that 11,400 children and working families are living below the poverty line, that doesn't deal with children whose parents are unable to find a job and who are being supported by the government, by community services. Mr. Speaker, that's 11,400 children. And if we don't find a way to provide those children with a quality of early learning, early childhood, you know, the ramifications from that will be felt for decades. And we've talked about other situations in this House where children have been, unfortunately, I think the system has failed them and their families. And it's the issue of poverty keeps coming up as I know the chair of Community Service Committee is an issue dear to her heart. And we talk about the issue of poverty, but it comes back fundamentally to that, and it ties into the issue of affordable child care. Mr. Speaker, we in this House, there's issues brought forward constantly around justice issues, and those issues are linked back to this. And the minister spoke about the early learning, the 2 to 5 years in a child's development. I couldn't agree with her more. And the opportunity that we have to reach out and correct some of the issues, quite frankly, that we have failed with a generation of people who are now in the system. We have an opportunity, if we do this right, to put in place a system that won't leave behind children who weren't born into a family that could afford to provide them with everything. Families, quite frankly, and parents who through no fault of their own, some difficulties that arise in all of our lives. We've been, in this House, have been blessed and very fortunate that, you know, we've been able to not had those kind of difficulties that have forced our families to go into poverty and have us lose out. Mr. Speaker, but we also have a collective responsibility as a society to ensure that we give every child an equal opportunity to move forward and fulfill their potential. The minister spoke about the issue of pre-primary. There are approximately, I think there are 20 sites of pre-primaries with 18 kids in them. It's interesting the size of the classes in them. I think that's a goal we should be working towards perhaps in the entire education system, but it's interesting the results and the feedback that we've been getting, and as the minister acknowledged today that she's been getting on the importance of that program and how it's been able to impact on the lives of the children who are fortunate enough to be in it. Well, I couldn't agree with her more. We need to look at expanding that program And in rural Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, we have schools that are closing because of declining enrollments. We have schools that are being put under tremendous pressure. There's no reason that that program could not be developed and run in the education systems around Nova Scotia. And in Metro, if we're unable, because of the size of the student population provided at a school, then there are appropriate facilities in Metro that we could be providing that same service to the children of Halifax and HRM. I think, you know, the answer, I think, lies before us. It's just a question on whether we're willing to reach out and grab it and run with it. The money's on the table, and there was money on the table from the federal government. There was $39 million left. It's there. It's a question of priorities, a question of where we want to invest. And I want to encourage the minister, it's fundamental to, I think, the growth of this province that we invest in our children. You know, I don't like the term of using them as our most precious resource. We have other resources that are important. It's fundamental to the province. I don't know the appropriate word, quite frankly, to describe them. You know, I'm fortunate to have two healthy, sometimes growing beyond my ability to keep up to them. You know, I'm fortunate, but there are no words to describe how valuable they are, not only to us as individuals, but to the success of our province and to the success of our country. And I think we need to really take a serious look at this issue and this program and expand it to a level that every Nova Scotian child between 2 and 5 has the access to a quality child care, but also in the early pre-primary, the 4 to 6, that we're giving every child the opportunity to be exposed to. It's not our job, quite frankly, to be picking winners and losers. It's not our job to make sure there are 20 programs where 18 children are being availed to this. It is our job to provide a quality system across the board, Mr. Speaker. And I think that is where we need to continue to go. There was some, we talked earlier about the $130 million 10-year plan, Mr. Speaker. No one seems to be able to follow that plan, Mr. Speaker, and that's one of the challenges that is before us. And I think we need to really take a hard look at where we're going and what our intent is with that. But I think, you know, one of the things that we've talked about is portability. And we fundamentally believe that is the way that child care spaces should be. They should be portable. We need to provide that flexibility for the families to have an opportunity to basically have that space being committed to them, and also be able to be flexible enough to deal with the needs and the distinct criteria that family wants to do, Mr. Speaker. And I think portability will allow that. There may be some issues with portability, some issues that we need to look at seriously and how we correct, perhaps whether that portable space is tied to a region, and perhaps maybe the way to go, Mr. Speaker. But I don't think we should throw it away and take away that flexibility that families so desperately need today. When you have the opportunity in my riding of Annapolis, you could be living in one end and working in another, and you as a family need that flexibility of a portable daycare space to be able to go and so you, quite frankly, can be at work on time and allow that family the opportunity to continue. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I want again and close by congratulating the member from Dartmouth North bringing this forward, offering to him my support and the support of our group and willingness to work with the government to make this happen. This is a fundamental issue for us as a province if we really believe in things that we're saying. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I'll take my place.
Honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this resolution focuses on a situation that is appalling. We have a crisis in this province that is undermining the economic policies of Nova Scotia And it's going to impact on the standard of living for all Nova Scotians, and that's our child care crisis. I was interested to hear reference to the government's plan on early learning and child care. Well, that's a one-page document with very few details and no direction or vision. And it's interesting to note that the vision statement that this province presented to the federal government in order to get some of the federal funding several years ago, that vision statement has been removed from the government website. And so I have to wonder, has the commitment to early learning and child care in this province been lessened as well? I would suggest we're going back to the days of patching a leaking ship with no destination in mind.
Order, please. Would the honourable member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley allow for an introduction?
A quick one.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Quick. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, very quickly, thank the member for allowing me the introduction. I wanted to take the opportunity, because they don't get here very often, to introduce the members of the House to the Glace Bay School Band, who are here today to play in the Military Appreciation Day. And I would like to thank the Premier and the Speaker for inviting them here today. They're honored to be here. They're a very prestigious band that has played internationally, and a lot of the students have been in this band since they were in grade 4. So if they'd all rise up, please, and say hi, and the members of this House could give them a great big warm welcome. Under the direction of Barb Stetter, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, indeed. I want to welcome. And on that note, I want to welcome all our special guests in the gallery today. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to say a word of welcome to those young people, but I was wondering if it would be entirely out of order if they played a little something for us.
Well, they will. Honourable Minister, I think you'll be able to enjoy that, and all Nova Scotians will hear them at Military Appreciation Day. However, I do want to thank the Honourable Member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley for indulgence, and we'll extend the time, the additional 2 minutes, to 2:36. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really appreciate that. I've stood in this House many times over the last 4 years and talked about the best interests of children in this province, and have been accused of, that's a soft message. That's not why we're here. So today I'm going to talk in economic terms to my colleagues on the opposite side. I'm going to talk about the future prosperity of this province. It may be costly to develop an early learning and childcare system in Nova Scotia, but it's going to be even more costly to look at the results of not doing so. When you look at the increased costs as they impact, and we're seeing that now, on our healthcare system, on our judicial system, on our economy, and in our education and social programs. So if we use an economic lens, the lack of an early learning and childcare strategy and plan has serious implications for Nova Scotia, and many of these are evident today. It's affecting our work and our productivity, now and in the future, in a number of ways. In Nova Scotia, we have one of the highest proportions of parents with young children in the workforce across Canada. Yet, we only have regulated licensed spaces for 12 to 15% of the children who need childcare in Nova Scotia. That's the third lowest regulated care in Canada. Currently, 77% of women with children under the age of 5 years are in the labour force in Nova Scotia, and that number is rising every year. Most of these families do not have the child care options they need to ensure safe, affordable, and quality learning and care. In 14 years, we've only added 2,000 regulated spaces in Nova Scotia, in 14 years. In 1992, we had approximately 11,000 regulated childcare spaces in this province. 14 years later, we have about 13,000. We are not making much progress. And when we talk about the value or lack of in regards to portable spaces, those or portable subsidies, those portable subsidies cannot be used if there's not a childcare space available for that family. So I think we have to go back to the root causes of some of these issues. Now, some parents or some people will suggest that parents should just stay home. You know, if you had your children, you should stay home and look after them. Well, to be more accurate, they're not saying the parents should stay home, they're saying the mothers should stay home. But where would we be in this province if all the women who are our doctors, nurses, teachers, truck drivers, business people, politicians, and military personnel, and have children under 12, where would we be if they were required to withdraw their services from the labor force? You know, we talk about a skills deficit in this province. That would be a huge economic crisis. And frankly, to be entirely selfish about this issue, our current and future workforce would be jeopardized, our standard and quality of living would go down, our productivity would be in an absolute tailspin, and many more families would be living in poverty. Our pension plans would be in chaos, and we would not be able to compete in the global economy. In addition, parents require childcare for other reasons besides work. There's often catastrophic illness and injury in a family, and children need to be cared for under those circumstances. A lot of people are caring for older family members. They have to go back for retraining or upgrading. They want to get more education, or they want to do volunteer work. We're actually seeing a decrease in the number of older women volunteers in this province because many of them are required to stay home now and look after their grandchildren. So the impact down the road is something that's going to grow. I also want to bring to mind the fact that in Nova Scotia, we have a declining birth rate. And is it any wonder that Nova Scotians of childbearing age are choosing in larger numbers not to have children or to have fewer children? We're not even replacing ourselves. More Nova Scotians are dying than are born each year. And there are many factors affecting this, but I would suggest that the lack of our family-friendly policies and programs in this province has to be included as a major factor. We hear the government talk a lot, Mr. Speaker, about immigration policy, and yet we hear stories of young parents not able to take advantage of English as a second language programs because they can't find childcare spaces to put their children in while they're learning English. A number of studies have been done internationally, nationally, and in this province, looking at the social and economic benefits of a comprehensive early learning and childcare system. And without question, the financial benefits to children and parents are twice what the program costs. And these benefits include higher academic performance and training, higher lifetime earnings of both the parents and the children. Now, these calculated benefits didn't even include the additional childcare jobs that might be added, nor moving many of the childcare payments out of the underground economy into a position where they can be tax revenue for the province. Just last fall, there was a new research report, called Public Policy and Participation of Rural Nova Scotia Women in the New Economy. And it concluded after a thorough review and documentary and statistical analysis that women are invisible in economic policies in Nova Scotia and across Canada. and a lack of childcare options is specifically mentioned as a factor in women's participation in our workforce here in the province. I challenged the minister on the rosy picture that she provided of the early learning childcare so-called system, which is just a patchwork arrangement in Nova Scotia. The problems here are endless. We have no system nor sustainability. We have a lack of regulated spaces. The Canadian average, even with Quebec as a positive example of what can be done by a progressive, forward-looking and wise, if I may suggest, provincial government, the Canadian average is only 15% compared to 60% regulated care in the United Kingdom and 69% in France. In Nova Scotia, we have a very low percentage of children under 5 in monitored care, and I think this should raise alarm bells to anyone who's concerned about safety and quality. The cost is unreasonable. In Quebec, parents pay $7 a day. In Nova Scotia, they pay between $20 and $40 a day. We've already talked about low wages and poor working conditions, and this does affect the quality of care and learning opportunities. There's a lack of incentives for the staff that we have to get higher qualifications. There's an equivalency clause that was grandparented in by the government without any endpoint. In fact, 200 new workers have been added since January of 2005 with minimal qualifications. So that's again diluting the expertise and training within the sector. There's a lack of common voice in the sector, and I would suggest that the department sometimes aids the fragmentation by pitting the for-profits against the the for-profits against the non-profits. But the most important thing is the lack of political will and vision in this province. Childcare is viewed as part of the welfare system, not a progressive, universal program that will be a stepping stone to prosperity. So it's a myth that Nova Scotia has a childcare plan. It has a one-page excuse that continues a piecemeal approach with little vision and little accountability. And I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that our children and our economy deserve better.
Order, please. Order, please. The time for debate has expired. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn. I believe that's in order.
Yep.
And the order of business, I'd like to mention for the benefit of members, the order of business for tomorrow. The order of business for tomorrow would be private and local bills for second reading, private and local bills in Committee of the Whole House, and public bills for second reading.
And
Mr. Speaker, the hours of the House.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House would sit for 6 hours, commencing at the hour of 12 noon and sitting to the hour of 6 in the afternoon. Of course, the moment of interruption at that point.
Okay, we stand adjourned, and I would just note to members before we conclude the session that the CPA annual meeting will immediately proceed the conclusion of business here today, and would ask all those available to be able to stay for that.